They tell you to fight your demons. But what if the demons are not monsters in the dark? What if they are you? What if they are the silent, insidious whispers that sound exactly like your own voice, the architects of your most private hells, the saboteurs who know your every weakness because they are woven into the very fabric of your being? You've tried to silence them. You've tried to outrun them, to numb them with noise and distraction, with fleeting pleasures and hollow victories. But they are always there, waiting in the quiet moments, in the space between breaths, in the reflection that stares back from the screen just before you click play. They are the ghosts of your potential, the specters of who you could have been, and they feast on the ruins of your resolve. You feel them now, don't you? That familiar tightening in your chest, that cold dread that whispers you are not enough, that you will never be enough, that you are destined to be a monument to your own broken promises. This is not a battle you can win with force. This is not a war you can declare and conquer. This is a reckoning with the silent demons that wear your face. And it begins not with a shout, but with a whisper. It begins the moment you stop fighting and start listening. The world I had built was a cathedral of glass, and I had just thrown the final stone myself. From the outside, it was a masterpiece of ambition. They saw the accolades, the meteoric rise, the effortless confidence of a man who bent the world to his will. They saw Kalen, the prodigy, the golden child who turned every venture into a triumph. But inside, in the echoing halls of my own mind, I was a fraud, a trembling imposter waiting for the inevitable collapse. My life was a meticulously crafted performance, and the applause was the only thing holding the walls up. The silence was my enemy, for in it I heard them, the silent demons. The first was the ghost of more. No matter the achievement, it would whisper, "Is this all? Look at what you haven't done. Look at how much further they are." The second was the phantom of perfection. It was a cruel artist that painted a masterpiece of my potential and then held up my life's work as a child's clumsy scrawl in comparison. It demanded flawlessness, and in a flawed world, that is a sentence of perpetual failure. The third and most vicious was the beast of external validation. It was a starving creature that lived in my gut, and it fed on the opinions of others. A word of praise was a fleeting meal. A hint of criticism was a week of starvation. My sense of self was not my own. It was a reflection in 1,000 fractured mirrors, each held by a stranger whose name I would never know. My cathedral of glass shattered on a Tuesday. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was a quiet, sickening implosion. A deal, one that was meant to be my magnum opus, fell apart. Not because of the market, not because of a competitor, but because of me. In a critical moment, a moment that demanded audacious courage, I hesitated. The phantom of perfection screamed that the plan wasn't flawless. The ghost of more whispered that a bigger, better opportunity was just around the corner. And the beast of external validation cowered at the thought of the criticism I would face if I failed, so I did nothing. My inaction was a cancer, and it devoured the opportunity from the inside out. The aftermath was silent. No one yelled. No one blamed me. They just looked at me with a quiet, devastating pity. They didn't see a fallen titan. They saw what I had always been, a frightened boy playing dress-up in his father's suit. That night I stood in my sterile, minimalist apartment overlooking a city that glittered with the ambitions of millions, and I felt nothing but a profound and suffocating emptiness. I had everything I was ever told I should want, and I was a hollow man. The applause had stopped, and in the silence the demons were feasting. That was the night I decided to disappear. Not to end my life, but to end the life I was living. I walked away from the money, the reputation, the name. I left the glass ruins behind and sought a different kind of silence, a silence not of absence, but of presence. My search led me to a place the modern world had forgotten, a rugged, windswept coastline where the ocean's roar was the only clock you needed. There, in a small, unassuming cottage, lived a man named Silas. He was not a guru or a mystic. He was a former titan of industry, A man who had commanded armies of employees and juggled empires, who had one day, at the absolute zenith of his power, simply walked away. He didn't sell his companies. He dismantled them piece by piece, ensuring every employee was provided for, and then he vanished. Rumor said he had gone mad. The truth was he had become sane. He lived a life of radical simplicity, a life of profound discipline and purpose that was entirely self-contained. He needed nothing from the world, and so the world had no power over him. I came to him expecting answers, a roadmap, a 5-step plan to slay my demons. I came to him as Kaelin, the failed prodigy. He looked at me, his eyes holding the calm depth of the ocean before him, and he did not offer a single solution. He only asked a question. "You say you are haunted by demons," he began, his voice calm and steady like the tides. "Describe your chains. Tell me not what they have done to you, but what you have allowed them to take." I wanted to tell him about the deal, the money, the reputation. I wanted to lay out the grand tragedy of my fall, but his question disarmed me. It wasn't about the external wreckage. It was about the internal theft. What had I allowed them to take? The question echoed in the sudden emptiness of my mind. The demons had never taken my fortune or my status. They had simply made me so terrified of losing them that I had chained myself to them. They were not external forces. They were internal permissions. My demon of more hadn't stolen my success. It had stolen my ability to feel gratitude for it. My phantom of perfection hadn't caused my failures. It had paralyzed me with a fear of attempting anything that wasn't guaranteed to be flawless. And the beast of external validation hadn't silenced my critics. It had silenced my own voice, making me a puppet to their every whim. For the first time, I saw my demons not as invaders, but as traitors within my own walls, traitors I had willingly given the keys to the kingdom. My reckoning was not with them. It was with the part of me that had welcomed them in. Silas listened, his gaze unwavering. When I finished, the confession leaving me bare and raw, he nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "The first step in reforging a sword is to understand precisely where it is broken. You have spent your life trying to build an indestructible fortress on the outside. You have polished the armor, sharpened the sword, and flown the grandest banners. But you left the king inside unprotected, starving, and afraid. We will not rebuild your fortress. We will forge a new king." His first lesson was not a lesson at all. It was an instruction. He pointed to a massive, gnarled block of granite near the cliffs, a piece of the earth that had resisted the relentless assault of the ocean for millennia. "Your task is this," he said. "Move it." I looked at the rock, then back at him, searching for the metaphor, the hidden meaning. There was none. "Move it where?" I asked. "That is for you to decide," he replied. "But you must move it. Every day from sunrise to sunset, your only concern is that rock." For the first week, I was consumed by the ghost of more. I saw the rock not as a task, but as a pitiful substitute for the empires I used to build. "This is meaningless," the demon whispered. "A man of your talent reduced to manual labor. Think of the deals you could be making, the heights you could be scaling." I would push and heave, my muscles screaming, my hands raw, and my mind would be 1,000 miles away, lost in fantasies of my former glory and future redemption. I made no progress. The rock remained stubbornly, mockingly immobile. At the end of the week, Silas came to me. He didn't ask about my progress. He simply looked at my torn hands and my exhausted, frustrated face. "Your body is here," he said, "but your mind is elsewhere. You are trying to move a mountain with your attention scattered across a dozen imaginary peaks. You are not fighting the rock. You are fighting the entire world you left behind. You cannot win that war. Not today." His words struck a nerve. He was right. I was still a slave to the grand narrative of my life. This rock was just a demeaning footnote. The next day I approached the rock with a new strategy. I would embrace the lesson. I would be present. But the phantom of perfection immediately took over. I spent hours analyzing the rock, calculating leverage points, sketching diagrams in the sand, planning the perfect, most efficient method to move it. I was so consumed with finding the ideal way to begin that I never actually began at all. The demon whispered, "If you can't do it perfectly, don't do it at all. Failure to move it with grace and intelligence will only confirm your inadequacy." And so another week passed. The rock hadn't moved an inch, but I had a perfect collection of useless plans. Silas returned. This time there was a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "You are still trying to win," he said. "You think this is a problem to be solved, a puzzle to be unlocked with your superior intellect. You are so afraid of making the wrong move that you make no move at all. The perfection you seek is a prison. It keeps you polished, pristine, and utterly captive." I was furious, at him, at the rock, at myself. I had come here for wisdom, and he had given me a Sisyphean punishment. That night a storm rolled in, a violent tempest that shook the very foundations of the cottage. The wind howled like a grieving god, and the waves crashed against the cliffs with concussive force. I couldn't sleep. I was haunted by the image of that immovable rock, a monument to my own impotence. And then a new thought crept in, a thought born of pure desperation. What if the point wasn't to move the rock? What if the point was simply to push? The next morning the world was washed clean. The air was crisp and cold. I walked to the rock, my mind empty of plans and expectations. I didn't think about yesterday's failures or tomorrow's success. I placed my hands on its rough, cold surface, planted my feet in the damp earth, and I pushed. I didn't think about moving it. I thought only about the contraction of my muscles, the strain in my legs, the air moving in and out of my lungs. My entire universe shrank to that single point of contact between my hands and the stone. For the first time, the demons were silent. They had no purchase here. The ghost of more couldn't distract me with bigger goals, because my only goal was this single, present push. The phantom of perfection couldn't paralyze me, because I had no attachment to the outcome. I was not trying to be perfect. I was simply trying. I pushed all day. The rock did not move. But for the first time it didn't matter. When Silas came that evening, he found me not frustrated but calm. A deep, quiet sense of peace had settled over me. "The rock did not yield," I told him. He smiled, a genuine, deep smile that reached his eyes. "No," he said, "it did not, but you did. You finally yielded to the task itself and not to the commentary of your mind. Today you did not try to move a rock. You simply pushed." There is a universe of difference between the two. This was the first true lesson, the power of a singular focus. My demons thrived in the sprawling, chaotic landscape of my mind, a mind that was always in the past or the future, always somewhere else. They were creatures of complexity and distraction, but in the stark, simple reality of the present moment, in the act of pure, unadorned effort, they starved. They could not breathe in the thin, pure air of the now. The task was never about the rock. The rock was an anchor. It was a tool to teach me how to pull my scattered self back from the phantom limbs of my ambition and regret, and to ground my existence in the only place where life is actually lived, here. The power was not in achieving the goal, but in the unwavering discipline of the process. My next trial was one of abandonment. One morning, Silas handed me a small, beautifully crafted wooden box. "Inside this box," he said, "is a detailed account of your greatest failure, the deal. I have spoken with your former colleagues. I have gathered every perspective, every misstep, every consequence. It is all in there. Your task is to carry this box with you everywhere you go for the next 30 days. You must not open it, but you must never let it out of your sight." The weight of the box was negligible, but its psychological presence was immense. It was a physical manifestation of my shame. As I carried it, the beast of external validation, which had been dormant, awoke with a vengeance. Every stranger's glance felt like a judgment. I imagined they knew what was in the box. I imagined them whispering about the great Kaelin and his spectacular fall. The box was a magnet for my insecurities. It amplified every negative thought, every self-doubting whisper. I felt the old anxieties creeping back in, the desperate need to explain myself, to justify my past, to manage the perceptions of people I would never even meet. The demon craved their approval, their absolution. It wanted me to open the box and rewrite the story, to paint myself as a victim of circumstance, a tragic hero. The temptation to open it was excruciating. I would sit with it for hours, my fingers tracing the lid, my mind racing with all the ways I could spin the narrative inside. I could burn the contents and declare myself free of the past. I could read it and wallow in self-pity, reinforcing the story of my own victimhood. I could use it as fuel for my anger, blaming everyone but myself. The box held not just the story of my failure, but every possible unhealthy reaction to it. For weeks I was in turmoil. The box was a constant, nagging reminder of everything I had lost and everything I feared I would never regain. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, I took the box to the edge of the cliffs. The ocean was a churning abyss below. I held the box over the edge, my arm trembling. I could just let it go. I could drop it into the sea and let the currents carry my failure away. It would be a symbolic act of release, a baptism of forgetting. As I stood there on the precipice of that false liberation, Silas's voice came from behind me, as calm and steady as ever. "Forgetting a wound does not heal it," he said. "It only allows it to fester in the dark. You are trying to amputate a part of your own history, but you cannot build a future on a foundation of denial." He was right. Dropping the box was just another form of running away. It was an act of cowardice dressed up as a dramatic gesture. I pulled the box back from the edge, my heart pounding. "What then?" I asked, my voice cracking. "What am I supposed to do with it? It's poison." "It is only poison if you believe it is," he replied. "Right now you see that box as your identity. You believe the story inside it is the definitive truth of who you are. That is the lie. That is the demon's power. It convinces you that your past mistakes are a life sentence, but they are not. They are simply data. Data." The word was so clinical, so detached, it stripped the story of its emotional power. "The Stoics had a practice," Silas continued, "called amor fati, love of one's fate. It is not a passive acceptance of whatever comes. It is an active, enthusiastic embrace of all of life, the beautiful and the terrifying, the triumphs and the failures. It is the understanding that every event, no matter how painful, is a necessary ingredient in the creation of who you are. You cannot love your life if you only love the good parts. You must learn to love the fire that forged you, especially the parts that burned. Love my failure. It sounded insane. Love the moment that broke me. Love the humiliation, the loss, the shame. It felt like a betrayal of the pain I had endured. But as I looked at the box in my hands, a different perspective began to emerge. That failure, as devastating as it was, had been a catalyst. It had shattered a life that was fundamentally unsustainable. It had broken the spell of my addiction to praise. It had driven me from my glass cathedral and led me here, to this rugged coastline, to this difficult but necessary work. Without that failure, I would still be a hollow man, suffocating under the weight of a success that was killing me. The failure hadn't been the end of my story. It had been the violent, messy, and absolutely necessary beginning. The poison was the cure. My demon wasn't the failure itself, but my interpretation of it. My demon was the narrative of shame I had attached to the event. The event itself was neutral. It was just data. For the rest of the month, I carried the box not as a burden, but as a reminder. It was a reminder of the fragility of an ego built on external things. It was a reminder of the destructive power of fear. Most importantly, it was a reminder that the worst day of my life had also been the most important. It was the day the real work began. On the final day, Silas instructed me to build a fire. "Now," he said, "you may open the box." I broke the seal. Inside, there were no detailed reports, no damning testimonials. There was only a single, small, elegant mirror. I stared at my own reflection. The face looking back was different from the one that had arrived here months ago. It was leaner, weathered by the sun and the wind. But the change was deeper. The eyes were no longer haunted by a desperate, needy fear. They were calm. They were present. The story of your failure was never in the box, Silas said quietly. It has always been in you. You have been carrying yourself this whole time. The only judgment that matters, the only narrative that has any real power is the one you see in that reflection. The question is, can you look that man in the eye and love everything he is, including the scars? Can you embrace his fate? I looked at my reflection, and for the first time I didn't see a failure. I saw a survivor. I saw a man who had been through the fire and was beginning to learn the shape of his own steel. I took the mirror, a symbol of the self-judgment and external validation I had been chained to, and I placed it in the fire. We watched as the flames consumed it, the glass cracking and melting, the reflection distorting and then disappearing into the blaze. I wasn't destroying my past. I was releasing my attachment to a single, broken image of myself. I was embracing the whole of my story. I was learning to love my fate. The third reckoning was with the future. My demon of more, the ghost of endless ambition, had been quieted by the physical labor and the lessons in presence, but it was not gone. It had simply been waiting for an opening. As I grew stronger, both physically and mentally, the whispers began to return. You have learned much, it would say. You are stronger now. Think of what you could build. Imagine the comeback. You could apply these principles and create an empire that would dwarf your previous one. You could show them all. The temptation was powerful. The siren song of achievement is the hardest to resist for a man like me. I had spent my entire life defining myself by my goals. The idea of a future without a grand, audacious target felt like a void. I brought this to Silas. I feel the old hunger returning, I confessed. The need to build, to achieve, to prove myself. But I fear it is the same trap, just with a different bait. Silas nodded. The desire to create is not the poison, he explained. It is a noble and human impulse. The poison is your attachment to the outcome. You do not crave the act of building, you crave the feeling you think you will get when the building is finished. You are addicted to the destination, and so you despise the journey. We must break this addiction. His method was deceptively simple. He led me to a small, neglected garden behind his cottage. It was overgrown with weeds, the soil hard and dry. This is your new empire, he announced. You will restore it. You will plant seeds and you will tend to them, but you will do so under one condition. You must accept that it may yield nothing. This was a new kind of challenge. With the rock, the outcome was irrelevant because the process was the entire point. Here, there was a desired outcome, a flourishing garden, but I was being asked to detach myself from it completely. Every day, he instructed, before you begin your work, you will perform what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. You will sit here and you will vividly imagine every possible thing that could go wrong. Imagine a sudden frost kills the seedlings. Imagine pests devour the leaves. Imagine a storm washes away the topsoil. Imagine that despite your best efforts, this garden remains a barren patch of dirt. You will meditate on this failure until you can think of it without a trace of anxiety or disappointment. You will make your peace with the worst possible outcome before you even plant the first seed. The first few days of this practice were agonizing. My mind, so used to visualizing success, recoiled from the deliberate imagination of failure. The phantom of perfection screamed in protest. This is inviting disaster. This is negative thinking. You must focus on the goal. But I trusted Silas. I sat every morning and forced myself to walk through the desolate landscape of my potential failure. I pictured the withered plants, the empty beds, the wasted effort. Slowly, something remarkable began to happen. By confronting the worst-case scenario head-on, I robbed it of its power. My fear of failure was a shadow, and I was dragging it out into the sunlight. The shadow could not survive the direct exposure. Once I had genuinely, truly made my peace with the idea of a barren garden, a profound sense of liberation washed over me. The anxiety that always accompanied my ambition vanished. For the first time, I was free to act not out of a desperate need to achieve a result, but out of a simple desire to perform the task at hand with excellence. My work in the garden became a form of moving meditation. I focused on the feeling of the soil in my hands, the precise depth to plant each seed, the careful, patient act of watering. I found a deep, quiet joy in the process itself. The potential future harvest was a pleasant thought, but it was no longer the source of my validation. My satisfaction came from the integrity of the work itself, in this moment, right now. I was learning to separate my actions, which were within my control, from the outcomes, which were ultimately not. This is the great secret of the powerful mindset. It is not about guaranteeing success. It is about building an internal state that is impervious to failure. It is about finding your victory not in the trophy at the end of the race, but in the unwavering quality of every single step you take. The world can deny you the prize, but it can never deny you the ability to run the race with virtue and courage. My garden began to grow. The first green shoots that pushed through the soil were a beautiful sight, but my joy was tempered. I appreciated their arrival, but my inner peace was no longer dependent on them. I had already found my reward in the tilling of the soil. This was the antidote to the ghost of more. By loving the process and accepting the potential for failure, the frantic, desperate need for the next thing dissolved. There was only this thing, this patch of earth, this moment's work. It was enough. The final demon was the most deeply embedded, the one that fed all the others, the beast of external validation. It was the belief that my worth was a reflection in the eyes of others. Having quieted the ghosts of past and future, I now had to face the phantom of the present, the opinions of other people. Silas knew that this demon could not be fought in isolation. It had to be confronted in the arena of the world. "It is time for you to return," he said one day. The words sent a jolt of fear through me. "Return to what? To whom?" "I don't mean to your old life," he clarified. "I mean to the society of others. You have forged your inner citadel here in solitude. Now you must see if its walls can stand against the pressures of the crowd." He gave me a simple task. I was to go into the nearest town, a small fishing village a few miles down the coast, and secure a job, any job. "It must be a job of service," he specified, "where you are required to interact with many people. And you must do it well, not for praise or recognition, but for the sake of the work itself." I took a job as a waiter in a small, busy tavern. It was a world away from the boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations I was used to. It was humbling, it was immediate, and it was a crucible for my ego. In my old life, my identity was built on being important, on being the man in charge. Here, I was anonymous, a functionary. My new role was to serve, to anticipate needs, to clean up messes. The beast inside me roared in protest. Every demanding customer, every condescending glance, every moment of being overlooked was a fresh wound to my pride. The demon screamed for recognition. It wanted to tell them who I was, who I used to be. It wanted them to be impressed. "They are treating you like a servant," it would hiss. "You are better than this. This is beneath you." In the first few weeks, I was in a state of constant internal warfare. I would perform my duties with a forced, brittle smile, while inside my mind was a raging storm of resentment and insecurity. I was doing the work, but I was still a slave to what people thought of me. My peace was a fragile thing, shattered a dozen times a day by a rude comment or a forgotten thank you. I was on the verge of quitting when I remembered Silas's core lesson, the one that underpinned all the others. The dichotomy of control. What other people think of me is entirely outside of my control. Their moods, their prejudices, their opinions, these are their business, not mine. My business is how I choose to act. My business is the quality of my service, the integrity of my effort, the virtue with which I conduct myself, regardless of the feedback I receive. I had been seeking my validation in their responses, in the tip they left, in their words of thanks. I was still placing the keys to my own happiness in the pockets of strangers. The next day, I went to work with a new mantra. My purpose is not to be liked. My purpose is not to be praised. My purpose is to be an excellent waiter. That's it. My focus shifted from managing their perceptions to mastering my own actions. I stopped trying to charm or impress them and started focusing on being brutally efficient, attentive, and present. I learned the regulars' names and their usual orders. I refilled drinks before they had to ask. I treated every customer, the kind and the rude, with the same level of professional respect. Not because it would get me a bigger tip, but because it was the right way to do the job. A strange thing happened. By letting go of my need for their approval, I actually started to earn their respect. But more importantly, it no longer mattered. My sense of a job well done was coming from within. I found a quiet dignity in the simple act of performing a service to the best of my ability. My worth was not determined by their applause, but by my own commitment to excellence. I was forging a new identity, one not based on a title or a bank account, but on character. The final test came one evening when a group of businessmen came into the tavern. They were loud, arrogant, and dismissive, cut from the same cloth as the man I used to be. One of them, in a moment of drunken impatience, snapped his fingers at me and called me boy. The old Kalen would have imploded. My ego would have shattered into a million pieces. The rage and humiliation would have consumed me. I would have either lashed out or been crushed by the insult. But now I felt something else. I felt nothing. His words were just noise. His opinion was a puff of smoke. It had no power over me because I had not given it any. I simply looked at him, my expression calm and neutral, and said, "What can I get for you, sir?" My lack of reaction seemed to unnerve him more than any retort could have. He saw that he had no hold on me, that his attempt to assert his dominance had failed utterly. He stammered his order, and for the rest of the evening he was remarkably subdued. That night, walking back to the cottage under a canopy of brilliant stars, I felt a profound sense of freedom. The beast of external validation was finally dead. It had not been slain in a glorious battle. It had been starved to death. I had simply stopped feeding it. I had learned to source my validation from an internal wellspring that could never run dry, my own commitment to living a life of virtue and integrity. When I told Silas what had happened, he simply placed a hand on my shoulder. "The final freedom," he said, "is to be authentically yourself in any room with any person under any circumstance and to be completely at peace with the outcome. You have reckoned with your past, you have made peace with your future, and now you have claimed ownership of your present. The demons are not gone. They are a part of you, but you are no longer their servant. You are their master. The journey does not end here. The work is never truly done. To believe so is the final and most subtle trap of the ego. The reckoning with silent demons is not a single event, but a daily practice. It is the practice of choosing presence over distraction. It is the practice of choosing courage over comfort. It is the practice of choosing purpose over pleasure. It is the daily, moment-to-moment decision to take ownership of your inner world, regardless of the chaos of the outer world. The man who left the city, the hollow king in his glass cathedral, is a ghost to me now. The man who stands here today is simpler, quieter, but infinitely more powerful. His power is not in what he can command from the world, but in what he can command from himself. It is the dangerous power of a man who needs nothing from you, and therefore cannot be manipulated by you. It is the quiet strength of a man who has faced his own worst fears and found that he is still standing. It is the radical freedom of a man who has defined his own worth, on his own terms. You who are listening to this, You feel the echo of this journey in your own soul. You know the names of your own silent demons. The ghost of more that tells you that you are not enough. The phantom of perfection that paralyzes you with fear. The beast of external validation that has you performing for an audience that does not care. Your reckoning is waiting. It is waiting in the silence you have been avoiding. It is waiting in the difficult task you have been putting off. It is waiting in the past failure you have refused to embrace. It is waiting in the terrifying freedom of defining your own success. This is not a path of comfort. It is a path of fire and forging. But it is the only path that leads to an unbreakable inner peace. It is the path of the Stoic, the path of the warrior, the path of the soul that refuses to be a slave to its own worst impulses. The first step is always the hardest. It is the admission that you are the source of your own suffering, and therefore you must be the source of your own salvation. It is the decision to stop blaming the world and start taking radical responsibility for your own mind. The tools are simple, but they are not easy. Find your rock. Find a task so consuming that it starves your distractions. Confront your box. Carry your past failures until you learn to see them not as sources of shame, but as sources of strength. Plant your garden. Work towards a goal while completely and totally accepting the possibility of failure. And finally, walk into the arena of the world and practice the art of being yourself, unbound by the need for applause. This is the great work. This is the war that is truly worth winning. Not the war against others, but the war for control of your own soul. So I ask you now, what is the name of the demon you will reckon with today? You don't have to fight it. You don't have to destroy it. You just have to look it in the eye and say, "You are a part of me, but you do not control me. I will not be your servant. I am the master of this house." Let that be your first declaration of independence. Share your declaration below. Let the world know that you are starting your own reckoning. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, in this moment. Join this community of shadow disciples, those who are brave enough to walk into the darkness of their own minds to find their own light. Your journey of 1,000 miles begins with this single, defiant step. Take it. The silence is waiting. And for the first time, you will not be afraid of what you find there. You will find the person you were always meant to be, waiting for you to come home.